ecosystems and fisheries that supply food to millions of people. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The makeup of President Obama's economic team is being shaken up some more as Lawrence Summers has announced he's resigning as director of the National Economic Council later this year to return to Harvard University. He is the third top economic official to leave the administration in recent months. According to Bloomberg News, the White House is considering naming a prominent corporate executive to replace Summers in order to counter Wall Street criticism that the administration's anti-business. The Wall Street Journal reports former Xerox chief executive Anne Mulcahy has emerged as a leading candidate to replace Summers. During her time at Xerox, Mulcahy laid off 30% of the company's workers. Mulcahy reportedly had dinner in Washington Friday evening with senior presidential advisor Valerie Jarrett. On Tuesday, President Obama issued a statement praising Lawrence Summers for his contributions over the past 2 years. Obama said, quote, "We are on a better path thanks in no small measure to Larry's wise counsel." Well, to talk more about Larry Summers, we're joined from Los Angeles by the veteran journalist Robert Scheer. He is the editor-in-chief of truthdig.com. He worked for the Los Angeles Times for more than 3 decades. His new book is called The Great American Stick-Up: How Reagan Republicans and Clinton Democrats Enriched Wall Street While Mugging Main Street. Bob, welcome back to Democracy Now! So President Obama has lost 3 of his 4 top economic advisors. Only left is Timothy Geithner.
Well, I don't think lost is the right word. I think fired is better. I think Summers, anyway, his departure is certainly to be welcomed. My book is largely about the follies of Lawrence Summers, beginning in the Clinton administration when he pushed through the Commodity Futures Modernization Act, which opened the floodgates to all of these toxic derivatives. He, as much as anyone in the country, bears responsibility for the economic debacle. And then Obama brought him back. And I think what he has done is basically throw money at Wall Street, continue the Bush policy, and get nothing in return, particularly in the way of relief for homeowners, mortgage foreclosure, moratorium on foreclosures. And so I think this is really good news. And, I hope he's not replaced with someone worse, but it's hard to imagine someone worse.
You wrote a piece, among others, since you've written extensively about Larry Summers, Bob, called Living Large and in Charge. Give us the history of Larry Summers.
Well, once again, the New York Times today, President Obama yesterday referred to this guy as brilliant. And I don't know how many times you have to fail before you're considered to be something less than brilliant. And this guy has, I say, been a disaster in every position he has held. He was the Treasury Secretary under Clinton who presided over the radical deregulation of that administration, fulfilling the fantasy of the Reagan Revolution. The Republicans couldn't pull it off. Summers and Robert Rubin, his mentor, did pull it off, and this is the basic root cause of this meltdown. Then he goes to Harvard, where he was a disaster as president, divisive, misogynist, demeaning of women, and so forth. And meanwhile, he's paying not only close to $600,000 by Harvard, but then he goes and consults on Wall Street. He was paid $4 million by D.E. Shaw, a hedge fund, and you'll notice the Obama administration has not reined in hedge funds at all. And he received almost another $4 million in speaking fees. He got $135,000 from Goldman Sachs for one short speech. He got that much from Citigroup for 2 speeches. So this guy, while he was advising Obama, was raking it in, $8 million while he's an advisor to the candidate. And then, for reasons that Obama will someday have to explain, he's brought in as the key guy. It's not Geithner. Geithner is a water carrier and was very much a subordinate in the Clinton administration to both Summers and Rubin. And they bring in Summers, and what he did is, again, follow that strategy, reassure Wall Street, don't spook the markets, give them what they want, submit to their blackmail, and make them whole. And they continued the Bush policy with a vengeance, throwing money at Wall Street. The Fed now holds $2 trillion worth of toxic assets taken off the books of the banks. The banks still hold a massive amount. And every time the housing market looks like it might get better, they dump this stuff. The Fed announced yesterday that the economy is not getting better. They're very troubled. So what is the legacy? It's like like Vietnam. Vietnam, as David Halberstam once wrote, was brought to us by the best and the brightest, people presumably of the best education and, you know, sincere and smart and so forth. And the economic meltdown reminds one of that in Vietnam. I mean, if this is what brilliance means, let's have a sort of ordinary common sense for a while. And common sense would tell you, help the homeowners now. You've done enough for the banks. Get something back from the banks. Make them, readjust those mortgages. Don't have it be voluntary. Empower the bankruptcy courts to help the people who are struggling, the 40 to 50 million people who are already underwater on their mortgages, but everybody else. And if you don't do that, you're not going to fix this economy. And I don't care whether he brings in a businessman or a labor leader or brings in Stiglitz or makes Paul Krugman his advisor. Whoever he brings in has got to tell him that, or we're not going to see progress.
Now, of course, it's not just Lawrence Summers. He's not in charge of the policy. Ultimately, President Obama is. What is his responsibility here? Why did he surround himself with, well, among others, Larry Summers?
Well, I'm not his shrink, you know. He mystifies me. I was very enthusiastic about the Obama candidacy. He gave an incredible speech in April of '08, laying out the source of our problem in the radical deregulation, saying we've ignored the consumer, the ordinary worker, and so forth. That he specifically criticized the priorities of the Clinton administration, but then again, he was running against Hillary Clinton. How you give that speech and then turn to one of the architects of Clinton's policy to run your own economy is beyond me. I have to stalk it up to opportunism and maybe his own insecurity in trying to grasp economics. After all, these toxic packages were designed to be opaque. All these financial finagling devices and so forth were built by people who are supposed to be mathematical geniuses. When long-term capital management collapsed, there were 2 Nobel Prize winners on the board. So these things can be very tricky. There's a legion of lawyers and PR people and everything else to all make them seem very reasonable. And maybe Obama was intimidated, and he seems to also get a lot of advice from the University of Chicago economists, one of whom is rumored to be the key player in this administration. And those people have a very old-fashioned notion of the free market that really does not apply to corporate America. I mean, it might have applied to Adam Smith's America, but corporate America is a political animal, and their lobbyists control Washington on anything that has to do with their interests. That's why we got the radical deregulation, and you got to bring somebody in who understands that if you don't check the Wall Street lobbyists and you don't check their power, you're not going to serve the American people. I mean, that's what this is all about. And right now, the Tea Party has seized the populist ground. They claim to be worried about the people are hurting. We have a lot of people hurting in this country, a lot of people. We have the highest level, highest number of people in poverty. 43 million Americans are in poverty, and poverty is defined by a family of 4 living on less than $22,000 a year. Try living in America, family of 4 under less than that. We have 43 million people in that, the highest number. We have the highest level of poverty among the able-bodied, the 18 to 65, that we've had since '94, thus wiping out all the claimed gains of the Clinton administration and everything that came after. We've lost $11 trillion of family income and worth. That was the latest report. We lost $1.3 trillion just in the second quarter alone. We have this enormous debt that's going to prevent us from doing things in the future that have to be done in terms of improving our lives. And so who's addressing that? These Tea Party people. And the Tea Party people are frauds in the main because they won't attack corporate power. They're basically, still singing the song of deregulation, keep government out of it. And the fact is that as long as Wall Street can use government for its purposes, then you've got to address that problem. And we do not have a progressive political alternative at this time. And unfortunately, Russ Feingold, who's like one of the few around, seems to be in trouble in Wisconsin. If your listeners can do anything in this election, they should try to help him, because if we lose his voice, we really lose the conscience of the Senate. But there are very few voices on the progressive side of things. Obama had promised to